Okay guys, in this video, we'll simplify Git and Github, two essential tools for version control and collaboration in software development. Git is a distributed version control system that tracks code changes, while GitHub is a web-based platform built around Git for seamless collaboration. If you are new to Git and GitHub or you are like me and have been using it for some time now, you probably want to have a better understanding of how to unleash the full potential of Git and GitHub. Well, this tutorial is for you. We'll explore all the key concepts through a combination of hands-on examples and animated slides, so that by the end of the video, you have a solid understanding of how to effectively manage your projects as well as collaborate on projects in teams. Okay, so talking about Git, I'm first of all going to go through an overview of Git and GitHub to give you the general concepts. So Git in general, as developers who are working on projects that have files and subdirectories in them. So these files or code we write normally generate a certain output. In cases of web applications, this output are reflected in your interface and you can actually visualize them. But the applications where the output is just in the command line. But the general idea is to have a project that can generate a certain output, and basically we are going to be doing modifications in these files and modify the code in such a way that it generates a certain another output in the future. We are going to be constantly doing that as developers, modifying the code to generate different results. Without Git, there's no way for you to roll back to a previous version of your code. So if you had introduced a breaking change or problems into the code when developing a new version, or let's say for some reason you just like to go back to the initial version of your project, so with Git, you can save different versions of your code and roll back to any version at any point in time you would like to do that. And GitHub now is an online Git-based platform, permitting you to sync the code on your computer system to a remote server, such that if your computer gets missing or you would like to collaborate on a project with someone else, you guys can connect to GitHub and pull that code back from GitHub, and you guys can do modifications to your project and save the code on GitHub as well. So that's how Git and GitHub play together. So working with Git, the first thing you need to do is install Git on your computer system, and that's easy to do. There are tons of tutorials and internet resources to help you do that. If you just quick search install Git, this first link takes you to this site where you can install Git. It shows you how to do that, and that's not difficult. You can easily find examples on how to do that. The main thing is that once you have Git installed now on your computer system, you need to initialize a Git repository. So that's the way to tell Git that these code files are going to be version controlled and are going to be tracked by Git. So if you have a project, for example, in this case, take a look here. We just have this shopping site. It's the folder that contains the code we are going to be working on. And inside this shopping site, we have an image folder and an index.html for our simple web application. And that's what we have here in Visual Studio Code, images index.html. And this code is what is going to generate us this interface. So that's basically what we have as our starting point. So initially or presently, this code is not a Git project. So Git does not know that this is a Git project, and that's because we don't have the .git file inside here, and we need to make Git know that this project is a Git project. And the way we do that is by hitting the git init command. And if we go to our terminal, we just type git init. You are going to take note of the new changes that are going to come. You see, initialize the Git repository. And if we head back to this our folder, we see now that we have this .git folder that tells us that this is a Git project. So Git can now track any changes made to this project. The next thing is to understand how Git tracks changes in a project. And the way to understand that is to first of all know that Git stores your project in different states. The initial state is the working tree, and after that you have a staging area and a commit area. So the working tree is what holds the files you are working on for that point in time. So this code we have here for the moment is in the working tree of Git. So Git knows that this project is here, and if we do modifications to it, we'll need to move it to the staging area, then create a commit of a particular version of that project. So let's consider that we'll add a new file, we'll do a modification. we are going to need to move it once more to the staging area and create a new commit version of that project. So the way we do that is using some git commands. The first one being git add dot. Git add dot is going to grab all these files and move them to the staging area. And after we hit git commit and the commit message, which is going to create a particular version of that project. So we're going to go ahead and create a version 1 of our project. So this interface, we are going to save it like this as version 1. Then we are going to modify the interface and save it as version 2. So the first command we hit is git add and git commit to commit it. So the first one is git add, which is going to move it to the staging area. So if we hit git add dot, it moves the project to the staging area. Then I want to create now a commit. We hit git commit dash m and the commit message. In this case, we'll call it version 1. And we hit enter. So Git now creates now a commit of that and saves it as version 1. And if we do some modifications, let's say for example, we want to create a new version now, we do some modifications, we call this, we change the color to, let's just say, dark slate blue, and we are going to use the same color for, in this case, we are modifying the color of this nav bar, the color of the button, change the color of the button to dark slate too, and we change the shoe as well to shoe 2, so that the shoe changes. And notice that the shoe is inside this images folder. So we change the shoe to shoe 2 and we save. See that the interface changes now, the shoe changes, the buttons and the navbar change to a new interface. And what we want to do now is save this now as a new version. So we are going to go through all the same steps. We are going to do a git add to move it from the working tree to the staging area, and git commit to save it now as version 2. So we do a git add dot, moves it to the staging area, then a git commit dash m. The commit message in this case is going to be version 2. And now we create now a new commit of that project. So now we have 2 commits for our project. So the question you'll be asking me now is, how do we switch between these different versions of our project? And for that, there are some git commands associated. The first one is git reflog. Git reflog is going to show us all the different commit versions, and it's going to permit us now to select a particular version using the git checkout to pick that particular version. So the first command we'll type is git reflog, and when we type git reflog, you notice that it tells us that we have 2 versions, version 2 and version 1. Presently, the head, which is the master, is on version 2, which is this one with the blue interface. But we want to go to that of the which is the red interface, and that's version 1 of our commit. So as we saw, the command we need to type now is git checkout and the commit ID. The commit ID is this number, this string we have here. So I'm basically just going to copy this string, and I'm going to type now the git checkout and the commit ID, which is that string I copied. So it's the commit ID for version 1, meaning that I want to move the head, which is the master, now to version 1. And if I hit enter, notice that the interface changes directly to the red interface. So I've switched to the previous version of our code. And if I type git reflog again, git reflog, you are going now to see now that the head, the master, now is in version 1. And we can switch back to version 2 by doing the same thing, git checkout. So you just need to type git checkout, then the commit ID for version 2. So I'll copy this. I see now that it changes now the interface back to the blue interface. So that's how we switch between different versions, create different versions of our project, and version control them with Git. So the next thing we'll be looking at now is GitHub. So how does GitHub enter the game? So if you notice, all what we have been doing now is locally on our file system, on our computer system. But what happens if our computer gets stolen or want to collaborate on this project with someone else? What we need to know is we need to create a GitHub account. We are going to see all those steps, but GitHub can also help us collaborate with others. The fact that we now have our code saved on GitHub makes a new collaborator come into the game. So we can have as many collaborators as we want, and these different collaborators are going to connect to GitHub, grab the code, and we can now be working on that code from GitHub. I can pull changes from GitHub, do modifications on my computer system, push back those changes to GitHub. My collaborator pulls all the changes I made, do modifications, and push it back to GitHub. And you see that all of us are collaborating on the same project thanks to GitHub. So to work with GitHub, the first thing you need to do is create a GitHub account, which is not difficult. You just head to Google search for GitHub. This first link you get, you land on this GitHub website. You click on sign up, you create a new account, put in your email and password, and then you are going to land on an interface that looks like this. So you'll be on now the GitHub interface. You now have these projects here. These are the projects I've been creating in the previous tutorial. But since as a new account, you are just from creating, you are going to have no projects. So your interface may look a bit different. But that's it. Once you create a GitHub account, the next thing you need to do is create a GitHub repository. So the GitHub repository is the equivalence, is now what is going to be the project on GitHub, which is, so if I go back to this previous slide, you see that you need a GitHub repository, which is like the project on GitHub, which is stored in your local Git project. So we're going to create that GitHub repository. The way to create is to click on this plus. You are going to have a plus icon here. You click on new repository, and what we are going to do is we are going to give this repository the same name of our project, our local project. It must not match, but in this case we just want to be a bit more organized. So our project was shopping site. This folder we have here, shopping site. So I want to give the GitHub and project the same name as our local project. So I'm going to call it shopping site. Shopping site. So you can give it a description, but we are going to leave it empty. We'll make it public so that anybody can connect and grab this project. But in case you are working with someone else, I don't want anybody on the internet to be able to look at this project. Or you are working in a company and your code wants to be private, you need to make it private. But in this case, we'll leave it public because it's not any confidential project. And if you notice, all the tutorials I've been creating on this for this channel, I've been creating them as public repositories because I want any person who watches a YouTube video to be able to come and grab this code from GitHub. So I'm going to leave it public. I'm going now to create this repository. So after creating the repository now, the next thing now is the next stage after you have created the repository. As we saw here, you need to create a GitHub repository, a GitHub project. Next thing you need to do is to link now your local Git project to the remote GitHub repository. So which is actually what we have to link now this local Git project to our remote GitHub repository. So the way we do that is by hitting a particular command. The command we are going to need to hit is this git remote add origin. So we are going to need to add this GitHub origin, which is the URL of our GitHub project. We are going to need it to add it to our local Git project. And you see, this is the command here. Actually, this command. So all these steps are in case you don't already have a GitHub project. But if you notice, we have already initialized the GitHub and gone through all this. So the command we need now is this one: git remote at origin, then the URL, which is this git remote at origin, and the URL of our GitHub project. If you take a look at this, you see now that is actually GitHub, your GitHub name and the name of your project which you created, which was shopping site. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to the terminal of our local Git project. In order to link the local Git project to the remote GitHub, we need to copy that code, go to the terminal of our local Git project and paste it there. So if I paste now this remote git add, I'm going to be linking this local Git project to the project on GitHub. If I hit enter, so the linking has been successful and we have now been able to link our local Git project to the GitHub repository. So after that, after linking it now, we can now interact now with Git and GitHub safely. So after linking it, basically what has happened is we now have our local Git project connected to GitHub. So we can now do pushes, we can now push and pull code from GitHub because the link has been created. So to push code to GitHub, you need to hit this command git push. So it's going to save now, grab all your code from your local system and save it on GitHub. We need to push the code which is on our local file system in our local project to GitHub. And the way we do that is by hitting this command. So we are going to go to our terminal and hit git push, then origin and the name of the branch. So initially the name of the branch is one of being master or main. So I'm going to call git push origin and I'm going to call master. So when I hit this command, you are going to notice that it's going to take some time and afterwards it's going to push this code to GitHub. So GitHub now is going to have now this code which we had locally. So you see that it tells us writing objects. He has done all this magic and he has created a new branch called master on GitHub with this code. So if we head back to GitHub and take a look, if we refresh here, we refresh now here in GitHub, you are going to see now that he has created a project called shopping site. So we now have a new repository called shopping site with the same code we have locally. So we have saved it here. It's presently on version 2, and we have images and index.html. So it's basically exactly the same code we have locally. If we enter images, we have shoe and shoe too, which is the exact equivalence of what we have locally. So that's how you interact now. So presently we have created, what we just did now is created this link between Git and GitHub, and it's now, it has permitted us now to save this code which was on our local file system on GitHub. So GitHub has the code we had locally on our file system. So that's how powerful GitHub is. And you can also pull code from GitHub. Since as that link has been created, you can also pull code from GitHub, meaning any new collaborator that enters the game, like Sam for example, can connect to GitHub and he can pull also the code from GitHub because the code is now present on GitHub. Okay, so Git and GitHub. So we're now going to see how Git and GitHub work together, because we have the Git project on our local file system, and we have GitHub, which is the remote repository for storing the code. We are going to see now that a new collaborator can enter the game, and we'll see how Git and GitHub is very useful for collaboration. So collaboration, how does collaboration take place? We have just done the first phase of everything. We had our local project here. I'm Joe, and we have the repository. The code we had on our computer shopping site was the repository code on my computer system. And what I did is I created a GitHub account, I created a repository, and I linked that GitHub repository, remote repository, to my local Git project, and that's what we did in the previous slides, and that's what we are just from seeing. And it permitted me to be able to push and pull code from GitHub. That's actually what we did in the previous slide. All what we're doing here is what permitted us create this link which I'm explaining here. So it has permitted me to be able to push and pull code from GitHub. So actually I pushed now, if you notice, I pushed the code out on my local system to GitHub, and GitHub now had all the files which we had on our local system. Okay, so let's say now that a new user wants to come into the game called Sam, a collaborator, is a friend of ours who is working in the same company with us and wants to work on the same project. So Sam wants to have the code I've worked on, and he wants to be able to collaborate with me on this project. So Sam is going to need to pull that code from GitHub. He's going to need to clone the GitHub repository. So in order to get the code on his local system, Sam needs to clone the GitHub repository. And the way he clones it is by hitting a git command. So what happens is Sam has to have git installed as well on his computer system, because for him to type this git command, he needs to have git installed on his computer system. So Sam is going to install git as well and hit the command git clone. We are going to go through this in hands-on, so I'm going to show this in the terminal. Let me just walk through the slides for now. So Sam is going to clone the repository, have the code on his computer system as well, so he has the same repository code. Then now Sam can push and pull code from GitHub, so we can basically collaborate on the same project at this point in time. Okay, so what happens is collaboration has to be a bit more structured and organized, because consider a situation where we are working and modifying the same file at the same point in time. That can cause some potential issues. So what happens is there is the notion of branches when it comes to collaboration. So Sam has to create a branch on his own, in his own project that he has put from GitHub. So he's going to create a branch using this command. We are going to go through it, and afterwards he's going to do his modifications he wants to do in code. He's going to add it, create a commit version, then he's going to push it to GitHub. Okay, so when Sam pushes it, initially GitHub had the original code, and as we saw, it was the master. So that's what we had here. When I created that initial project, it's the master. Presently, it's just the master branch that we have. So this initial code is the master. But when Sam does those modifications and he creates a branch and he wants to save it, he's going to save it as a new branch. He can call it the branch Sam, which has its own code modifications. So after pushing the code, we have a branch Sam now on GitHub as well. So in addition to having this master branch, we are going to have a branch called Sam as well. Then if Joe does some modifications on his own on the project as well, he's going to follow basically the same steps. He's going to create his own branch with a new branch name. He's going to do all these commits and modifications, and he's going to push it as well to GitHub on a new branch called Joe. So we have the original master branch from which they put their original codes. They did their modifications on a new branch which they created, and they pushed that new branch to GitHub. So Joe pushed his own branch as Joe, and Sam pushed his own branch as Sam. So it's natural now that we want the main branch to reflect the changes Joe did and Sam did. So in order to achieve that, there's the concept of merging. So Sam is going to merge his code into the master branch, and Joe is going to, so that the master branch has the new updates Sam did. And Joe is going to merge his own changes as well to the master branch, so that the master branch reflects those changes they did on their computer system. So I think I've basically explained everything when it comes to collaboration here, and we're going to go through that in action, hands on now. So initially we're already at this stage where Joe, which is, if I come to our computer system here, if you take a look here, presently, if I go out, let me go out maybe some few steps. So I have two projects here, two folders are called Joe and Sam. So I'm going to simulate simulate this new user Sam on his own computer system on this other folder. But basically what's going to happen is this folder needs to be on a completely new computer. It doesn't have to be in the same computer. Okay, so if I enter the folder Joe has the project. So he has the shopping site and he has all the code associated. And as we did, we already linked this code to Git, as here he has the .git, and we linked it to GitHub. So basically what happened is we connected to GitHub, created a Git repository called shopping site, as we saw, and we pushed all the code modifications to GitHub. That was done by Joe. So inside the folder, Joe did everything and he pushed that code to GitHub. So now what happens is Sam, the new user, wants to come into picture, and Sam does not have that code on his computer system. Notice that there is nothing inside here. So what Sam has to do is Sam has to clone the code. So as we saw, Sam has to clone that GitHub repository, that code which is present on GitHub. And he does that by hitting this git clone command and the repository URL. So how do you get this repository URL? The repository URL is basically this URL here. If you come to code and you have this HTTPS, this is the repository URL. So we are going to copy it. Sam is going now to enter his own computer system, and let's say he opens Visual Studio Code here. Okay, so as we saw, Sam has to type this git command, git clone, and the remote URL which we just copied. So waiting for. So he's going to hit git clone, then he's going to paste in that remote URL which we just copied. And what's going to happen is after that, Sam now is going to have the project now on his own computer system. So Sam hits git clone, and you see that what's happening now is it's cloning the code. You notice that initially there was nothing here, but presently we have shopping site. So he grabbed shopping site from GitHub, and Sam now has shopping site on his computer system, and that's what we expected. Sam now has Git the project from GitHub because he typed this command. So Joe and Sam now have the code on their computer systems. So if you see here, Joe has the code and Sam has shopping site also. He has the same code because he typed the clone command. Okay, so Joe and Sam now have the code on their computer system, but let's say Sam wants to perform a modification. Sam wants to do some modifications to the code. The first thing he has to do is he has to create a branch. The concepts of branches. A branch is going to store all the code, the code changes Sam wants to do for this point in time. So he's going to create a branch by typing the command git branch -b and the name of the branch. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. But first of all, we're going to create the branch for which is going to contain our code modifications. I'm going to call git branch -b, and let's say I'm going to call this branch, let's say login. Okay, so it's basically, let's say, the login page. Sorry, this command is not branch, it's checkout. It's git checkout dash b, the name of the branch. So it's not branch here, it's checkout. That was a mistake. Git checkout dash b and the name of the branch. Okay, so presently, if you notice here, what we are inside GitHub, Git and GitHub and SAM, but we need to go into this shopping site project to be able to use the, since as this is actually was the Git project. We are going to see the shopping site. So we're inside shopping site now, and we can create now the new branch. So we are going to git see the previous command we type, which is git checkout dash b and the name of the branch. So Sam wants to work on the login. So we're just going to call this let me call it Sam, as we saw initially. So we said Sam is going to create his branch called Sam, because if you remember here, he was to create that branch and save it as Sam on GitHub. So we're going to create a branch, check out the branch, call it Sam. So we have created a new branch called Sam, and that's where we're going to do all the modifications. So let's say we want to work on it. Let's say, for example, a login page, and Sam wants to create the login functionality. So in addition to what we have here in version 2, we want to have a button which, when a user clicks on it, is going to take him to the login page. And that login page is what Sam wants to work on. So we are going to create, let's just say, a new file. Let's call it login.html. Create that file. We are going to boilerplate the new starter template. Then let's just, we are not going to do much. We'll just call it login. We'll just put some text in it, a paragraph text in it, which we are going to call login. Then we are going to create now a link in the nav bar, which when the user clicks is going to navigate the user to that login. So inside this nav bar, I'm just going to create an let's just say an anchor element, and the href is going to navigate the user to, sorry, this login has to be inside the shopping site. So we now have this link here, login, and it's not really visible. So just going to give it some simple styling, put some small inline styling here. Style, I'm going to give you margin of 20 pixels top and bottom, and 50 left and right. I'm going to give you a color of white as well. Okay, so now I have this login button here. It's not the best styling, but just to demonstrate the idea that Sam worked on this login feature. And when the user clicks here, it navigates the user to this login page. Okay, so that's what Sam has worked on. And well, he wants to save now these changes. And as we saw, he needs now to do a commit for these modifications he has done. He's going to go through git add, git commit, as we saw in the previous cases. So he's going to do git add to move it to the staging area, git add dot. Then he's going to do git commit dash m. Then he's going to call it login, for example. He's going to call it login, that he has worked on the login feature. Okay. So Sam has done that commit. So he has done the commit and he has finished. So what he has to do now is he has to push now this branch back to GitHub. So he has finished working on it. He needs to push the branch, and the way he pushes it is git push origin and the name of the branch. So he's going to replace this remote branch inside here with the name of his branch, which is Sam in this case. So we are going to type git push origin Sam. So git push origin Sam, and when he hits that, it's going to push this local modifications that Sam has done locally to his computer system to GitHub on his own project here to GitHub. So it's going to create, this was the master branch, it's going to create a new branch called Sam with all the modifications and the login feature Sam, the modifications with this login functionality Sam created to GitHub. So if we go now back and look at GitHub, our GitHub project, you see now that if we refresh, You see now that if we click here, in addition to this master branch, we have this SAM branch, and this SAM branch contains all the modifications Sam did. So you see now that we have this login.html, which was created by Sam. If you look at it, you have this login and index with images. So Sam created this login.html, and that's actually what has been added here inside this SAM branch. So we have both the master and SAM branch with all the modifications Sam did. And that's what we expect, because if we take a look here, we saw that Sam had to create, there had to be a new branch called Sam. Okay, let's say Joe on the other hand wants to work on a new feature as well. So Joe is going to do basically all the same things Sam did. He's going to create his own branch, do the modifications, commit it, and push to GitHub as Joe. So we're going to rapidly go through that. So we're going to come here, go to the Joe folder, which is basically Joe on his own computer system. So that's Joe. We're going to open this project now in GitHub shop inside. We're going to open in GitHub, open in code. So now we're inside Joe, and Joe wants to do a new modification. So he's going to create a new branch. Git, to create a new branch is git checkout dash b, and the name of the branch, we are going to call it Joe. Joe has created a new branch. He's going to do his modifications he wants to do inside this branch. So let's say let's open this in live server. Open the live server. So this is the code Joe has. You notice that Joe does not have that login functionality, and that's because Sam did it on his side and it's now on GitHub, but he has not yet been merged into the main code. So Joe does not have, he has his initial code he had from the start. So let's say he wants to work on the sign up functionality. So we're going to create a sign up page, which is what Joe is working on. Let's say we'll create a new file. We're going to call it signup.html. Okay, so I've created this signup.html. It's basically going to be similar to what Sam did. We're just going to put some text inside here, a paragraph text, which we are going to call sign up. We are going to come to our index.html and link the sign up. We are going to create inside the nav bar. We're going to create another link that links now to the sign up. So I'm going to create a sign up. It's an anchor element. href to the sign up.html. We're going to style it a bit inline, styling, style. So we have now the sign up. Okay, so now we have the sign up button, and when you click on it, it takes you to the sign up page. So that's what Joe has worked on, and Joe has to do the same things. He has to git add to move it to the staging area, git commit to create a commit version. That's we're going to call it Joe. Let's call it sign up. Then now he has to push now to GitHub. So he's going to do the git push origin, and he's going to call the name of his branch. He's going to push it to GitHub as Joe. So okay, when he does that and he pushes it now to GitHub as Joe, what we expect now is to have now another branch on GitHub called Joe. So we'll have master, Sam, and Joe with Joe's own modifications. So we'll head to GitHub and we'll take a look here. We fetch. If you take a look now, you see now that it's even telling us that Joe had a recent push. You see that it tells us that Joe had a recent push a minute ago, and when Sam did his own push, it told us that Sam did a push and it was 7 minutes ago. So that's some nice notifications there. And if you come to this drop down, you see the different modifications. Sam added his own modifications and he had this login.html. Joe worked on his own modifications and he came with the signup.html. So that's nice. He has all the modifications, and the next thing we need to do now is to do the merge as we saw. So we have to merge Sam's own code to master and merge, and afterward merge Joe's own code to master. So we start by merging Sam's own code to master, so that the master branch has all the code modifications Sam worked on. Okay, so to do that, we need to create a pull request compare and pull request. So click on this button here, compare and pull request. There are two ways. Either we click here or we click here, pull request. They're going to do the same things. So I'm going to click here, compare and pull request. Okay, so you need to take note now here inside this first option, things as want to merge into the master, and this arrow here is showing us that it's going to be merging into the master all the changes from Sam's branch. And that's basically what we want to do. The arrow is just indicating that it's merging from into the master. This is that arrow from Sam's branch. So that's it, merging into master from Sam's branch. And it tells us that everything is fine. We can click here, pull, compare and pull request, and we can come down here and click on merge the pull request and confirm the merging. So he has created now a merge now, and he has merged Sam's modifications into the master branch. So the master branch now has Sam's modifications integrated. And if you look at the master code now, he has plus, he has in addition to all this the login.html, which were the modification Sam did. And you can also do the same thing for Joe. Either click here, compare and pull request to merge Joe's own changes. As we saw, want to merge these changes now. See now that it added that Sam's additional. Want to merge now Joe's own changes into the master. So, and in the same way, Joe can go ahead and merge his own changes as well into the master branch in the same way Sam did. And that's it, guys. The master branch now is going to be updated with the latest code from both Joe's branch and Sam's branch. So it's going to have all the changes Joe and Sam did. And that's it for this tutorial, guys. And if you had some value from this tutorial, consider supporting me by clicking on that like button. It encourages me a lot to go ahead to listen more of these useful tutorials.